As a contrast to the way we set up a responsive website in the last pair of tutorials, I want to look now at how Adobe has integrated a function within Dreamweaver CS6 that enables you to create a responsive website with fairly minimal effort. I'm talking about how we can use fluid grid layouts directly from the start of our site creation so that we have a clear focus on 3 distinct browser types right from the off. By the end of this tutorial, you should have enough information to understand the theory, principles and practice of creating a fluid grid site so that you can then progress to populating the resulting fluid grid with contents of your choice to create the site. Prior to getting started, let me say that by using Dreamweaver to create a fluid grid to produce a responsive website means that rather than using a completely site-wide media query that imports a separate style sheet for every device, Dreamweaver includes all the queries into one single style sheet, and we'll see this in a few moments' time. There are a number of ways to access the fluid grid layout panel, but they all lead you to the same place. You could choose the splash screen and choose the relevant clickable button link, or you could go up to File and then down to New Fluid Grid Layout if you don't have the splash screen switched on by default when you start up Dreamweaver CS6. Let me just move it over to the left a little. Anyway, however you choose to access your Fluid Grid Layout splash, you'll see we're creating a new document, as we've always done in the past, but this time we're asking Dreamweaver to load 3 separate viewports. A mobile, a tablet, and a desktop viewport. And the dimensions for each of these 3 views is presented underneath each heading here. The mobile view is set to 480 pixels, the tablet at 768 pixels, and the desktop at 1232 pixels. And you'll also see a good definition of what a Dreamweaver Fluid Grid Layout is. We're told that Dreamweaver Fluid Grid Layouts is a system for designing adaptive websites. It contains 3 layouts and typography presets, all based on a single fluid grid. Now, if for some reason you choose not to use a fluid grid layout at this point, you'll see you can navigate here on the left and choose a different document setup type, i.e. a blank page or a blank template, or a page from a template, a page from a sample, or other. However, we'll work through the fluid grid layout option, as that's what we're concerned with here in this VTC Quick Start course on responsive website design. As you move down to each graphic, mobile, tablet or desktop, you'll also see numbers inside. You can change these to whatever you want between 2 and 24, but I'll explain what they are for and what they indicate so you can make an informed decision on what you change them to should you not want to accept the defaults. Incidentally, should you change a number value here and want to revert back to the default shown here of 5, 8 and 10, simply click on the Reset to Default button. These numbers are there to indicate the amount of guide columns that will appear in each grid that will be integrated into the resulting views once you set this up and running to develop your responsive site. Now I'm going to change the desktop from 10 to 12 because the resulting 12 guide grid columns will be divisible better if I want to use 3 main areas spanned over 4 columns here within the desktop view. You'll also see there are percentage values below each graphic too, 91%, 93% and 90%. Additionally, the mobile view has an extra percentage value of 25% of column widths. This indicates the gutter width as a percentage of the column width. Now, even though this percentage figure is below the mobile view or the mobile graphic, it still transfers across to the tablet and across to the desktop too. The minimum and maximum percentage values you can set for the gutter is 5% at the minimum all the way up to 100% at the maximum, though I'm a little confused why you'd want to set it at 100%. Anyway, getting back to the other 3 percentage numbers, 91, 93 and 90, well, these relate to the width of the layout grid in relation to the screen size. Of course, it's up to you what you set this at. You might prefer to leave them at the defaults of 91% and 93% and 90%, but I'm going to change them all to 100%, and I'll make the desktop not 10, but 12 for the reason I said before, and I'll make the column width here 15%. Now each time you run this fluid grid layout option, these settings will remain. Dreamweaver remembers them for you. You don't need to create a preset. Not that there seems to be an option. Anyway, then your next step can be to simply hit the Create button. However, before you do, notice you can set your doc type here. It's at HTML5 at the moment, but of course you can choose another option if you like. No, I don't. I want to leave it at HTML5. Additionally, if you want to attach a distinct user style sheet that you've pre-created, is pre-created a word? Well, you know what I mean. If you want to attach a style sheet that you've created prior to this, then you can do here. You'd click this button. I'm not going to. That can come later. So I'll click on Create. Dreamweaver now wants me to save the CSS file I mentioned earlier that gets created by default. Not to be confused with the pre-created CSS file you might have added in the previous step. Well, I want to save this Dreamweaver generated CSS file with a better name than untitled, so I'll call it Fluid Grid. I know Fluid Grid is 2 words really, but I don't really like adding in the underscore, so I'll leave it as Fluid Grid as 1 word. And I'm going to say I want to save it in a folder I've already created called Styles. OK, and then I would simply hit Save. Consequently, the new document opens up. My untitled document. We'll change that later. It opens up displaying this viewport of what the mobile view with the relevant grids I stipulated in the setup a moment ago.